I believe by now Africa understands its enemies and its friends. The enemies of Africa are against its development, and friends of Africa are supportive, are pro development of Africa. Now, the Eritrean president, Isias Aferweki, is one of the controversial figures in Africa today. In an exclusive interview, I noted that the Eritrean president was very specific in criticizing the US, or simply the Western ideology in Africa. According to Aferweki, the Western countries, mainly led by the United States, are defaming China. They are defaming China for engaging Africa in a death trap. But Isias Aferweki sees the opposite. According to Isias Aferweki, China is pro-African development compared to the West. Why was he saying so? Isias Aferweki is saying that China is giving African countries loans, and I know Africans who will be watching this video will comment saying and acknowledging that China gives their governments loans, and these loans are used in development projects. For example, in my country Kenya, China gave my government a loan to construct the standard gauge railway. After giving African countries these loans, the management of these facilities, the return of these funds, and the collection of these funds remains on Africans. Isias Aferweki is saying that China is giving African countries loans, then giving them the authority to manage these projects and collect these finances and return the loans. That means that management of these projects remains that of Africans. But when Isias Aferweki compares the same problem with Western countries, he says that Western countries such as the United States, and you know the United States operates through the IMF, International Monetary Fund, gives African countries loans, and these loans, the Western countries, the IMF dictates to African countries on how to collect and refund these loans. For example, in my country Kenya, the IMF gave the government of Kenya loans to maybe support the economy, to revamp the economy. After giving the government of Kenya loans, the IMF also dictates the kind of policies that must be implemented to collect these taxes and refund the loan. This is the difference that Isias Aferweki draws in the comparison between the Western countries and China. Isias Aferweki supports Chinese quest, Chinese relationship with African countries, but at the same time strongly criticizes the Western engagement with African countries. In my view, Isias Aferweki believes that the Western engagement with Africa is selfish. Selfish, in other words, the Western countries, the IMF is trying to put African countries into a debt trap. Debt trap. The same thing that happened to Ghana. Ghana borrowed money from the IMF and other world organizations, other global countries, mainly from the West. After borrowing money from these countries, including the IMF, which is not a country but a financial body, dictated what Ghana must do to collect taxes to get the funds to return the loans. This is the difference between China and Africa. And from my point of view, China believes in the development of Africa. China believes in the progress of Africa. China is committed to ensuring that African countries are developed and compete in the same stage as other developed countries. The West the United States, the IMF are concerned about their interests. They are concerned about fulfilling their self-interests, and they are concerned about putting African countries into a debt trap. They give you loans. If you are unable to pay, they come up with leverages. If you are unable to pay this debt, then do this. Give us access to your resources. Give us access to your minerals. Give us access to your key infrastructures so that we can control them. I support Isias Aferweki's argument that Western countries are trying to defame China's image in Africa. The West is simply selfish of China because it sees China as a strong competitor in Africa. And from what I see, China has outpaced the West in acquiring colonies, acquiring friends, making friends in Africa, because China gives you loans with leverages. It gives African countries loans and gives them the opportunity to manage their own affairs in returning these funds. The West, on the other hand, gives African countries loans but dictates to them on how to collect these funds, on how to manage their affairs, on how to manage their politics, on how to manage their economics. China is a friend of Africa, but the West is an enemy of Africa. And with that, I support Isias Aferweki's argument that the West is trying to defame China's image in Africa.